Joel Klatt here on the show. How are you, Joel?
I'm great. How are you, man?
You've seen some great college football this year, brother.
Dude, we've had some amazing games going back to week one. It seems like a lifetime ago, but we had the Rosen 34-point comeback, Texas USC, Penn State, Ohio State. Last week was a barn burner for Bedlam. And I think this one might be the best of them all. 5 versus 6, Oklahoma, TCU. It's going to be certainly exciting.
Well, again, you do a great job, Joel. As you know, I tell you every time you come on here, you do know the reason why you're seeing all those great, ridiculously tight games, correct? You know why, right, Joel?
Gus Johnson.
Please.
It's the Gus effect.
We had him on. He called in from Columbus the day before Penn State, Ohio State. I'm like, what is it? What happened? He doesn't want to talk about it. It's kind of like Fight Club.
Right. No, I can see that.
It's unbelievable. What is it like sitting next to him?
Oh,
Joel?
gosh. I mean, you talk about, pinch yourself moments. Let me just tell you a quick story about the first year that we ever got to work with one another. And listen, I was not a name as a player. I had a decent career, but I had to really earn my way in this business. I started doing high school football games and arena football games. I'd worked with, 20, 30 different play-by-play guys and producers. And so when I finally got kind of tapped by Fox to go up and be, on the lead crew for college football, I was so excited, like a kid in the candy store. And to boot, I get to work with Gus Johnson, right? This guy is like kind of the soundtrack of the NCAA tournament in my head, and just so many great big calls. And so the third game that we ever called together was Texas hosting Cal. And this was Jared Goff at Cal, and Gerard Hurd was going to be the quarterback for Texas. And it was an amazing game. Now, It's in hindsight diminished because of the year that both of those teams had, but this was early in the season in September, and Gerard Hurd took off late in the game to kind of score what looked like was going to be a game-tying touchdown. And that was my first time standing next to Gus when he just went full Gus. And I got to tell you, here's the best part. Hurd takes off, and I'm like, here it is, And so I kind of turned. I'm like, I'm going to watch it. And he turned away from the field to his spotter, our guy, Scotty. Scotty's in the booth with him, and Scotty is not just the spotter. He doubles as the hype man. And so all of a sudden, Scotty is, air punching, and he's, going crazy in the booth and almost dancing around, and Gus is going, oh! And I was like, this is incredible. I came to a game, and a concert broke out.
I love that, Joel, because the enthusiasm just jumps through the screen of the both of you. Really, really does. It really, really does. And
I appreciate that.
No,
we have
seriously,
a lot of fun, man.
Seriously. And, I talked about this with Gus when he was on, too. It reminds me a lot of Scott, when I sat next to him. I would do the same thing, too. He didn't have a hype man sitting next to him. but he would do the same thing, doing the highlights, really get into it. And it was just fun to behold, and it's infectious. It really is. And people, so we've done Oklahoma a couple of times now in the last 3 weeks. We had them against Kansas State, and then last week in Bedlam. And Marquise Brown, he's a first-year wide receiver for Oklahoma, and he's a junior college transfer, kind of highly touted. He's a small guy, so he didn't get the recognition that some other guys did, but he is a burner, man. He is fast. And against Kansas State, he's from Hollywood, Florida. So against Kansas State, I'm looking down at my board, and it says Marquise Brown. The ball gets thrown to him. I'm like, okay, that's Marquise. And Gus starts going Hollywood. And I looked back down. I was like, wait, is his name Hollywood? What's happening? And guess what? Now it is. This guy actually changed his official name on Twitter to Hollywood Brown because of Gus Johnson, man. It's so great. It is great. Joel Klatt here on the show. So is Baker Mayfield your Heisman Trophy guy? I mean, you've seen him a lot. You've seen him in person, what he can do in big spots, Joel. Is he your Heisman Trophy front runner?
Yeah, right, and I think it's by a pretty wide margin after last week because all the guys chasing him or that were in the conversation had really poor weeks. The only one that didn't have a poor week, and it was because he got banged up and left the game early, was Josh Adams. So maybe Adams stays up there due to injury, but Bryce Love had a poor game. It was his first game without 100 yards of the season. Saquon Barkley, again, in 4 of his last 8 halves of football, he's rushed for negative yards. You just can't have that as a Heisman candidate. Obviously, he beats Rudolph head-to-head. We just haven't seen anybody else step up to the point that Baker Mayfield has. And, Rich, I'm to the point where I think this guy's going to have a long NFL career. You know, coming into the season, I questioned whether this RPO-style spread system was going to translate for Baker. But this guy he's got the leadership, the intangibles, the efficiency of Russell Wilson, and yet he's got like the magic of a Stafford or Favre in the way that he plays when the play breaks down and when he loses the schematics. He's one of the best improvisers that we've got in college football. So my respect level, my enjoyment of watching him play right now is at all-time high.
So there's going to be a lot going on while you're calling TCU and Oklahoma. Then you've got Miami and Notre Dame at the same time, essentially under the lights. And so this week we're finally. Do you think we're going to see a change in the top four based on this action, win-lose between these two teams? That would Oklahoma or TCU crack the top four with a win? Should Notre Dame lose or Miami win in that regard?
Even
or should Notre Dame win?
Everybody wins ahead of them.
Right.
This would, I think, put Oklahoma in that top four, and maybe even TCU, because they're sitting there at 6, kind of primed as well with a great defense. But the thing is I thought that the Clemson ahead of Oklahoma this week, last night in the reveal, I did not agree with that. First of all, Oklahoma has better wins. Their loss is much better than what Clemson's is. And you can deflate or talk about their defense all you want, but the bottom line is that this is still a complementary game. It matters what you do on the opposite side. If your defense struggles, what do you do on the offensive side? If your offense struggles, what do you do on the defensive side? And the fact of the matter is that Oklahoma right now is third in the country when it comes to yards per play margin. They're averaging 8.5 yards per play. There's not been a Power 5 team that has done that ever in college football. Their defense gives up a lot of yardage, but Rich, they play pretty well, complimentary. You know, I mean, third in the country, like I said, just behind Alabama and Washington in that margin. So I certainly believe they should have been 4 this week. With a win, they would absolutely jump into that 4 because Clemson does not have much left to build their resume as they kind of close out this season.
Well, certainly you have to sit here and think, a couple more minutes left with Joel Klatt of Fox Sports, you have to sit here and think that Georgia and Alabama are going to be undefeated when they see each other in the SEC championship game. And even if there's a close loss by one of them, they're both in, right? I mean, like these are tea leaves that you can read right now. So there might be just only 2 non-SEC spots available. Is that?
I will tell you, I know that that's the narrative, but I'm a big believer that you should have to win your conference to go play for the national title. Okay, I thought that last year. I thought Penn State should have been included, maybe over Ohio State. And I'm going to be a big proponent of that this year. In particular, like let's say Wisconsin's undefeated. They should go over a one-loss SEC because it's not like this SEC team is going to be the loser of that game is going to have gone through some gauntlet. Let's say it's Alabama. If you actually put up blindly Alabama and Wisconsin's resume right next to one another, they are virtually identical. It's not like Alabama has played anybody, and the committee has given them a huge pass by including LSU in the top 25 and not Michigan. If I was a Michigan fan, I'd be irate. 2 losses on the year, and you've got 5 3-loss teams in the top 25 above the Wolverines? You kidding me? That's cooking the books to me, Rich, and that's up there to support Clemson. You know, Clemson's up there with Auburn at number 10. I don't like that ranking from Auburn. You got LSU up there, which supports Auburn, which then supports Clemson, which will then support Alabama. So I hear that sentiment a lot about the loser of this supposed SEC championship game. One, I don't think that if you lose your conference, you should be able to go to the playoff. And 2, I just don't think the resumes of those 2 teams are all that strong when you look at just the disaster that the SEC is this season.
Great stuff as always, Joel. Send my best to Gus, and I definitely want to speak to you before you go back to the big house in a couple weeks. That's
it's going to be my first visit. Rich, I can't even tell you how excited I am. I've never called a game in the big house. We're going to be there for the Ohio State game. I'll have them next week as well when they travel up to Camp Randall and face Wisconsin.
Look forward to that, Joel. Really, really will. Thanks again.
You got it.
Thank you, bud. That's at Joel Klatt on Twitter.
For more Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Rich Eisen Show app.